And joining me now for more on the Ukraine crisis is Anton Fedyashin, a professor at American University. His focus is Russian and European history. And thanks so much for joining us, Anton. And we should say that you just returned from Russia, where you were teaching over there for the summer. We appreciate you coming into our studios. You just heard in Kate's report that NATO said that it has mounting evidence that Russian troops are in fact operating inside Ukraine and launching artillery attacks at Ukrainian troops from Ukraine soil as well as Russia. Moscow's ambassador to the UN has vehemently denied all of this. What is your reaction to this?
Well, the thing about mounting evidence is that it has to be presented if it's there, and then it can be evaluated. There's been no evidence presented by NATO. As a matter of fact, NATO has been buying into a lot of Ukrainian claims that have been completely untrue. For example, about a week and a half ago, they claimed that they had destroyed part of a military convoy that had entered Ukrainian territory. That turned out 2 days later to be false. So once the evidence is presented to the world, then we can decide whether Russia is actually involved or not.
Okay, and what would NATO's reasoning be for wanting to believe what Ukraine is saying? Why wouldn't they take Russia's position?
Well, this is something, of course, that NATO officials will have to answer for. Anders Fogh Rasmussen is very famous for saying in 2003, when he was the Prime Minister of Denmark, that he did not believe but knew that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and we all know how that ended. The advantage for the Ukrainian side of claiming that there is a real Russian military presence is that it explains and justifies the failure of their campaign to quickly defeat what they claim is a minor and isolated terrorist force operating in southeast Ukraine. In reality, there's a lot more support for the separatists and supporters of federalism than the Ukrainian government actually claims.
Okay, well, so now we've heard from Angela Merkel, now the German chancellor, who's advocated for a measured EU response to all this. She met with Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, as we know, and urged a political solution to the crisis. I mean, are we at that point? Can they broker a deal at this point?
I think the deal will be broken when all the sides, especially in the West, Brussels and Washington, understand just how dire the economic situation in Ukraine is. It is massively in debt. It's about to implode economically. The winter is coming, and instead of using money to buy Russian gas, although Ukraine is enormously in debt to Moscow, they're spending money on a military campaign that is destroying the infrastructure of the southeast of Ukraine, which is what the Kiev will have to rebuild. So once everyone recognizes the grim reality of the economics in Ukraine, I think that's when the political will appear, and we'll see what happens in Minsk on the 26th.
European Union obviously very upset about this war. How big of a threat is this war to the European Union?
I think the biggest threat is economic. There's very little chance that this will actually spill into a massive European hot war, although stranger things have happened exactly 100 years ago. But I think the reality is that the EU realizes that without Russian support, there's absolutely no way that Ukraine will start fixing itself economically. The EU does not have tens of billions of dollars to dedicate to rebuilding this country. The Russians will have to be involved. And that will be the economic basis, which is the fundamental root of this crisis to begin with, will be the bridge that will finally, I hope, get all the nations at the negotiating table and get this country out of its mess.
Quickly, last question, because we're pressed for time here. But what about the sanctions? You were just in Russia. Do they seem to be affecting the people there?
Well, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I was really shocked by the amount of grassroots support for a government that many people actually disagree with its policies domestically, but they are fully behind it, well over 80% in the counter-sanctions that Russia has imposed. They seem to be having absolutely no effect, quite the contrary.
All righty, Anton Fedyashin, thank you so much for your time and
Thank
your
you for having
insight
me
here on this Saturday.